Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is our installment of Grow With Us, which is our Manhattan Valley Pediatrics series about, hold on, let me give Dr. Grant entrance, about your child's development. And this week we are going to talk about, and 6-month-olds are great. I mean, they're really a lot of fun. You're sort of through the hardest. Hi, Jess.
Hi. Hi, Jude.
I arrange it wrong and then half my head is cut off, but oh well. So anyway, I'm just going on about how 6-month-olds are so amazing and fun, and you're kind of through some of the tougher parts of infanthood. And it's 6 months, half a year of, which for a lot of parents is a big milestone. So you should congratulate yourself a little bit. But today we're going to talk about 6-month-olds. There's sort of two major topics we're going to touch. Dr. Grant is going to first talk about 6-month-olds development, and then I am going to talk about starting solid foods. And then we will open up to questions, and you guys can ask us whatever you want. We'll also talk briefly about sleep. I forgot that very important little topic that people are worried about a little bit sometimes. Anyway, so Jess is going to take it away talking about development.
Hi, guys. Welcome on this lovely weekend. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the new fun things.
I can't hear you all of a sudden, Jess. Okay.
I'm on call, so we may get cut off if a call comes in, I just realized, which I have never had that experience before, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, I thought I'd talk about some of the new fun things our 6-month-olds are doing. They have a whole new set of activities in their repertoire, and they're a little more engaging. So in terms of gross motor, I think the two big skills they're really working on is sitting and beginning to move. So from a sitting point of view, a lot of them now have the torso control to kind of stay up for a couple seconds before they topple or end up leaning forward and tripoding, putting their hands down and kind of holding themselves up. And that's really a huge skill. I tell parents it's one of the best skills they get in the first year, because once they can sit, they can look at you, they can follow you, they can talk towards you, they can use their hands. They're not nearly as stuck in one position like a beetle. So I really like to work on that with them. I do a lot of putting them between my legs and catching them as they topple and helping them refine their balance. Also, gross motor wise, some of them are beginning to work. A lot of them can roll. Most of them can roll by now. And they may be working on beginning to crawl. So they may be getting kind of up into that on all fours position. It's okay if they're not, but they may be. And you can kind of help them. You can put a hand under the belly and kind of pull them into that position. If they're kind of swimming on the ground on their stomach, you can put your arms behind them. So when they do kick, they kind of push off your hands and maybe move forward a little and realize, ooh, I can actually do something here. You can put toys just in front of them, out of their reach, to give them a little bit of motivation. I do always tell parents not all kids crawl. Some kids skip it altogether. If they're not crawling as they approach 9 months, they may just go right to walking, and that's okay. There's no adults who can't crawl. They'll learn it eventually. It doesn't matter that it's not coming at this age, but many kids are working on that. In terms of fine motor, they're working on reaching. So now they'll reach for things you put in front of them. They're beginning to work on transferring. So they'll move from one side of the body to the other. They may be beginning to put some things in their mouth. So they may be able to find the pacifier and find their mouth with it now. As you begin solids, which Dr. Hoffman will talk about, they may be beginning to slam their hand down on the table and kind of shove a Cheerio in their face with the palm of their hand once it sticks there. And then in terms of their interaction, they're much more interactive. They should now turn to your voice. So when you walk in the door after a long day of work and you say, I'm home, you get that baby who whips their head around trying to find you and giving you a smile, which is really gratifying. And they are making lots of noises. Lots of people call this the pterodactyl age. There's lots of shrieking, screaming, and that's normal. You sometimes will see things like fake coughing, which tends to make a lot of parents anxious. Why is my kid coughing so much all of a sudden? And a lot of times it's purposeful. They did it once and they got a response. So now they're going to keep doing it. And that's, I think, the big skill set they're working on now. Just to mention before I turn it over to solids, you may also see the very beginning, at least before we see you at 9 months for our next, check-in, which I assume will be 9 months. I'll see what Dr. Hoffman says, but I think that's what you're thinking, Judith. You may be beginning to see the beginning of some object permanence. So they may now remember a little bit when you leave in the next couple months. It may make leaving for work a little harder. You may get some separation anxiety. It's totally normal. And like I mentioned, they're beginning to move a little bit. So you need to begin to think about childproofing. Well, I think we should talk probably more about it at 9 months, but just begin to put in your back of your mind, they're going to be moving soon. They're going to get into more of those things that I leave laying around. If it's your second, they're going to begin pretty soon to get into the older one's toys. So you can get some sibling stuff going on, which I think is also worth talking about coming up at the next time. But it's definitely a more fun age from a developmental point of view. Are we missing anything, Judith, you can think of?
No, I think you hit on all the big ones. I always think it's funny because it's really like clockwork. People come in for the 6 month and they usually have the same question, like, my child does this weird wheezing noise. I think they're having trouble breathing. And it's like they all do this like, and it scares every parent and makes them think that their child is choking. And it is a very scary noise. If any of us do that regularly, it would attract attention because it would mean we're having trouble breathing. But I just think it's so funny how every 6 month old figures that out along with the coughing. Like they know that they get the response. But yes, no, I think you touched on all the important things, that they're starting to be a little more mobile. They're starting to sit up a little bit. They can grab at things. They kind of like can indicate what they want. They can communicate when they're happy or sad. It's a fun, good age. And another reason it's really fun is that you get to start feeding them, which a lot of families find a little bit stressful. Because it's just something different. You sort of have it down at this point, like, oh, my baby's on 4 formula bottles a day, or I'm breastfeeding them 5 times a day, and you're in your routine and you think everything, all of a sudden, hey, you get to do something new. You get to start solid foods. So for those of us who are, anxious about making a mess, you've got to let go a little bit. There's going to be a mess. You just sort of have to accept it, but it really is fun. And I have done a Facebook Live about starting solids. So I'm going to present some of that information. Forgive me if I'm repeating myself, if any of you guys have watched the solid food introduction one, but there's lots to talk about. We're happy to take questions. So in terms of solid foods, I tell everybody the biggest thing is don't stress. Like, you do not need to get a certain amount of food into your baby every day. You don't need to, feed them twice a day, every single day. It's flexible, and a lot of us like that. So if you want to do it twice a day, every day, that's fine. But if you have a super busy Saturday and you can only give them solids once that day, no big deal. The food right now is just really for fun and to teach them how to eat. You don't really need to worry about them getting tons of calories from it. It really won't replace a bottle or a breastfeed for a couple of months. Sometimes close to 9 months, they start to eat enough solid foods that they back off on formula or breast milk. But for now, it's really just to teach them how to use their mouths a little bit differently. They're probably by 6 months starting to show some interest. So, like as you're eating your food, they'll start doing the like, or grabbing at the food, and it usually means that then they're ready to start eating. There's many different ways to start solids, and if you look around the world, people do it in many, many, many different ways. So you have to do something really crazy to mess it up. You're not going to mess it up. A few basic rules I tell everybody: no honey until 1. So no honey until 1. I also tell people in terms of the higher risk allergy foods, which are eggs, fish, dairy, nuts, and wheat. You want to introduce those slowly, one at a time, and have children's Benadryl around in case they have some sort of a reaction. If your kid before their 6 months has proven to be sort of an allergic type of kid, meaning they're like covered in eczema, they have a lot of reflux, you should talk to your pediatrician about that and decide if it warrants a visit to the allergist before starting these higher risk allergy foods. But if not, you want to start those slowly and one at a time. And usually what I tell people to do is start with eggs first in terms of the higher risk allergy foods. The yolk of the egg is the less allergic part. So start with the yolk of the egg, see if they tolerate it. If they're fine, you can move to the whole thing. Usually I say do it as sort of a scrambled egg. And if they tolerate that, you can move on to the other allergens. If they don't tolerate egg, and what would that look like? That would look like profuse vomiting or hives on the face usually. Then you need to see the allergist and sort of make sure that, there aren't any other food allergies. But anyway, those are sort of the rules. And if you have questions about that, please chime in. But in terms of starting solids, there's a big trend right now. A lot of our patients are doing something called baby-led weaning, which I think is great. It makes a lot of people nervous. You don't have to do this, but I like the concept because I agree that babies don't need to be fed only purees. I think purees can be one of many types of foods that they eat. And if you are more comfortable just doing purees for a month or two before you move on to like finger foods, that's totally fine. But if you want to do baby-led weaning, that's fine too. So first and foremost, as I said, you can kind of feed them anything other than honey. And in terms of the higher risk allergy foods, do it slowly and stepwise, as I just talked about. And that's really it. I mean, you can give them any fruit, any vegetable, any meat, as long as it's the right texture and consistency. Usually what I say is at the beginning, and I usually say this at the 4-month visit, start slow. Start with some mushed up fruits and vegetables. Start one new thing at a time. Make sure they don't have some sort of a reaction. Don't ever force feed them. So let them have as much as they want. So if you mush up a banana and they take one bite and they spit it out and they're not interested, don't start playing games with them. Don't try to force them to eat it. If they're not into it, let it go. You can try again the next day. Sometimes you have to introduce things many, many, many times before they actually like them. So I think the studies say something like sometimes you have to introduce it 17 times before they like it, which is hard. Obviously you're not counting, but just to give you an idea of it, it can take some time. So you start with mushed up. Usually they start out with some mushed up fruits and vegetables. Only introduce one new thing at a time, just in case they have a reaction. Now, a lot of people have this rule in their mind that they have to give exclusively one food for 3 days and only that food for 3 days. I personally don't agree with that. I don't know what you think, Jess, but usually I say one new food a day. Most people aren't going to do that because it just takes a lot of energy to acquire that new food every day. But if you give them peaches today and your baby is totally fine with that, tomorrow you can do peaches and avocado, and so it's additive. It's not like you have to give only peaches or only avocado, but only one new additional thing. So at 6 months, I would offer food 1 to 2 times a day, no specific volume, let them eat until they're done. I know this sounds very basic, and just keep on doing it. And I'd encourage you to do the solid foods with your meals. I know this is hard, and dinner is really hard because often babies go to bed earlier than the parents, but at least 1 to 2 times a day, try to feed them their solid foods when you're eating, because it makes it more fun and more communal, and they'll start to have more curiosity about what you're eating. And if you have something on your plate that doesn't have any allergens that they're curious about, it's okay to let them start tasting little bits of your food as long as it's sort of soft and mushy. In terms of the baby-led weaning stuff, so I don't know how much you guys know about it or how much you've read, but the whole concept is that you never actually feed your baby, that the baby is completely in charge and in control of the food. So you start with very soft food that they can grab and put in their mouth. And at the beginning, they're not going to get a lot from it, but people like it. They like the concept because the baby is always in control and can really determine what they eat. And I think in some cases, there are certain infants who never like being food and bed. They just want that control. And for those babies, this is perfect. And so with that, at the beginning, they're definitely not going to be getting a lot. So you want to do sort of chunks of things are sort of soft. A lot of people will do a baked sweet potato, a chunk of it that's not super duper soft and let them grab it. Or I've heard of a lot of people steaming broccoli and making it sort of limp. Let them grab it and put it in their mouth and explore it. So you can do that, but I don't think you have to abide by one specific way of starting solids versus another. You can do a little bit of baby-led weaning and a little bit of purees and kind of see how your baby does. You can also start giving them water in a sippy cup at this stage. Again, it's not really to provide much hydration. It's just to teach them how to drink from a cup and how to drink something that's not milk, that doesn't require the sucking, mechanism. They learn to sip things instead. So the muscles around their mouth are maturing, and you're teaching them how to do that as well. But don't obsess. People ask me all the time, how much water do I have to give the baby? I say, put like 3 ounces in a cup every time you give solids, see how much they take. It doesn't matter. Like if they don't take that, you don't have to like force it down their throats. As they approach 9 months, often they're eating enough that the milk intake will go down, but we'll talk about that a little bit at the 9 month. But usually at 6 months, they're still taking the same amount of formula or breast milk that they were taking before. They sort of plateau. They don't increase, but they sort of stay the same as where they were sort of like 4 or 5 months or so. The other point I'd like to drive home is you don't have to make your own baby food, but you can. If you choose to buy it, that's totally fine. But whatever you give them, it can have flavor. It doesn't have to be super bland. A lot of people are like, I don't know, she doesn't like to eat this potato that I made. I'm like, well, what did you put? How did you prepare it? Oh, it's just like a baked potato that I mashed up. Well, I wouldn't want to eat that either. So I would add like a little salt. You can add a little garlic. They can have flavorings. You should flavor the food as you guys would flavor it for yourselves, assuming that you want your child to eat the way that you eat eventually. So introducing them to a wide variety of foods early will help encourage them to eat a wide variety of foods later on. There are no guarantees, obviously, and all kids go through their picky phase. And if you have a picky 2 or 3-year-old, it's not your fault. It's not something you didn't do, but this is something you can control and try to introduce them to at this stage in hopes that it will help them eat, not be as picky later on. So that's the whole spiel about food. Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? Anything that Jess or I touched on? I don't think I see anything.
I would just add in, Jude, that for breastfed babies, I do think they need a source of iron as they get a little bit older. So, whether you're doing iron drops or whether you're doing a baby cereal that's iron fortified, you can certainly talk about it with us in the office. But I do think giving them some source of iron by the time they're 6 months is important. And I think that, trust your gut. I think what you said, Judith, about, there's no one way. I think Judith and I have a little bit of different ways probably of doing solids with our kids, and it's within the range of normal and acceptable. And I suspect that all of our kids, Judith and I, have both gone through picky phases and less picky phases, and some kids are better eaters than others. And so I think it's really whatever makes you comfortable. And so I think picky, and I don't think it makes a huge difference whether you do baby-led weaning or don't do baby-led weaning. I think at the end, they're kids and they're going to eventually eat, and they're going to eat what they eat. So I think do whatever makes you happy. I agree with you, Judith.
Yeah. And then I think we were going to touch briefly on sleep. Usually by this stage, you're at sort of a set schedule in terms of nighttime sleep. The baby usually going to bed somewhere between 7 and 8. Obviously, I have some families who put their babies to bed at 6, and I have some families who put their babies to bed at 9 or 10. But most babies at 6 months are going to bed somewhere between 7 and 8. They're hopefully getting at least like 10 to 12 hours of sleep at night. It's not necessarily straight. It's very normal for a baby to still wake up in the middle of the night at this stage. But you definitely can sleep train them at this stage if that's something you want to do. And I would say most 6-month-olds are getting at least 2 good naps and maybe a 3rd nap later in the day. It's still, a little bit irregular. You still may be struggling with like those short little naps that, 30-minute naps that make you crazy, but most people are sort of heading towards a more regular schedule. Jess, I don't know, what would you say?
No, I agree. I think most are on 2, but some have that 3rd little cat nap. I agree completely. If we're done with sleep, I just wanted to briefly mention, if it's okay, elimination, just because I feel like parents are still very focused on pooping somehow. I don't know how 6 months in we still talk so much about poop, but we do. And as we start solids, I think that can become a little bit of a challenge. So I just like to warn parents that as you start solids, their digestive system can change a little bit. And so be cognizant that it's okay. Stools can become a wide variety of lovely colors, and that's pretty normal at this age. Things like banana and applesauce are pretty constipating, and things like prunes and pears and peaches are pretty helpful for elimination. So as you get to know your child, if they're a child who veers towards constipation, you may not want to do a lot of banana. Banana is like a 4-letter curse word in our house. Whereas if you don't have a child who veers in that direction, banana is oftentimes a favorite food. And so you now have a little bit of control and can just be mindful of that.
Yes. All right. Let's see if anybody has any questions. I'm just going to look at the thing. I don't see any questions. All right. Well, thank you guys all for tuning in. And if you want to post questions, we're going to post this on our Instagram page. We can also answer them after the fact. And we will see you. I'm not sure if we'll do it next week because it's Christmas, but we'll see you soon for a 9-month-old episode. And we hope everyone has a really happy holiday.
To the end of 2020. Happy New Year.
All right. We'll see you soon. Oh, there's another one. Oh, no question. Just saying that was great and informative. Well, thank you. We're happy. Okay. Happy holidays. All right. Bye, guys.